house felt completely different without Max. Every time Elaine entered a room, she saw traces of him. The mark on the edge of the rug, the empty bowl, his favorite toy in the corner. Everything seemed to scream his absence. Several times a day, Elaine would go out to the flower bed, gently touch Max's medallion, and speak to him as if he could hear. "I'm so lonely, Max, but it feels like you're still with me. I can feel it." One evening, while gazing out the window, she saw a child playing with a puppy in the neighbor's yard. Her heart warmed for a moment. Then tears welled up in her eyes. She remembered Max, his bark, his playful smile, the warmth in his eyes. The next day, Elaine wore Max's medallion around her neck. A tiny piece of jewelry, but such a precious memory. Somehow she felt stronger. That very evening, her neighbor came over. "Elaine, I know you're going through a hard time. I'm really sorry, but I need to go out of town for a week. I have a little puppy. Could you look after him? His name is Bruno." Elaine wanted to refuse at first, but something stirred in her heart, and she silently nodded. The next day, Bruno arrived. A little puppy with white fur and brown spots. Innocent and clumsy, still learning about life. Elaine watched his every move, noticing how her heart slowly began to soften. One day, Bruno curled up at Elaine's feet and fell asleep. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "You didn't replace Max, but it feels like you brought me back to life." The week flew by. When the neighbor returned, Elaine wasn't eager to give Bruno back. The neighbor said, "I can see you've bonded. If you'd like to keep him, he can stay. Bruno seems very attached to you." Elaine looked silently at Bruno. The little dog jumped happily onto her lap and licked her face. In that moment, something reawakened in her heart. "Yes, I think I'm ready." Time passed. Elaine and Bruno became the living heart of the home, the light and comfort of each other's lives. Bruno was lively and playful, but Elaine could still feel Max's warmth in him. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from her daughter, whom she hadn't heard from in a long time. It read, "Mom, I know everything. I hurt you deeply, but I've had time to think. My child is growing up, and he needs to know his grandmother. We'd like to visit you, if, of course, you're okay with that." Elaine held the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Her heart trembled. Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they were tears of joy. That evening, as she stroked Bruno's head, she said softly, "You brought me back, my dear. Life can begin again now. Without you, I couldn't have smiled at this letter." Bruno nuzzled against her lap. Once again, the house filled with warmth and peace. After leaving the hospital, Elaine and Bruno slowly began adjusting to normal life again. It didn't take long before the story of this extraordinary dog spread across the internet. A journalist heard about them and published an article. Bruno became known as the dog who came back to life, and Elaine, the woman who defied fate. Her former neighbors, friends, even estranged family members saw the story. They were silent, unable to explain why they had walked away. But Elaine held no grudge. She knew who had truly stayed by her side. Even if they never return, she once whispered, "You were my family, Bruno. Who would I have been without you?" Together, Elaine and Bruno visited parks, played with children, and traveled to distant neighborhoods to inspire lonely elderly people. Bruno was no longer just a house pet. He was a living legend. A school invited Elaine to speak to children about hope and resilience. She brought Bruno with her. The children ran and played with him unafraid. One boy, crying, said, "I'm alone too. I wish I had a friend like your dog." Elaine knelt down and said, "A true friend loves you no matter what. Bruno loved me even when people left. That means you're not really alone." Someone out there believes in you, just like he believed in me. Soon after, a local TV station invited Elaine and Bruno onto a show. They shared their story. The audience wept. That night, Elaine sat on her bed writing in her journal. Bruno slept peacefully beside her. But in the morning, he didn't wake up. First, she didn't realize. She sat quietly next to him. And then she understood. Time seemed to stop. But no tears came. Because Bruno had fulfilled his mission. He had brought Elaine back to life. Elaine stroked his head gently. You changed my life. You were my hope. And now, you'll live in my heart forever. She placed a small plaque where he was buried. Bruno, not just a dog. He was love. He was a second chance at life. Years later, Elaine founded a small sanctuary for animals. People brought lonely dogs and cats, helping them find new homes. At the entrance to the center, one sentence was written. If all you have left is a dog, that's enough. Because a dog loves with its whole heart. That night, Elaine sat by Bruno's side without sleeping. Morning came and the doctors entered the room. His condition is unstable, said a young doctor. But we noticed something. He responded to your voice. That means there's still a spark of hope in his brain. Elaine's eyes lit up. He hears me? He recognizes my voice? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes, but now he needs care and emotional connection. Only you can bring him back. From that day on, Elaine read to Bruno every day. Stories of her childhood, of her loneliest days, of how she found her way back to life. You were my only hope, Bruno. When the world forgot me, you stayed. And now I won't forget you. Not ever. At first, Bruno lay motionless. But one day, Elaine noticed his ear twitch ever so slightly. It was the first sign of hope. A week later, he opened his eyes, faintly but unmistakably. You came back to me? Elaine smiled through tears. There was a familiar warmth in Bruno's gaze. The doctors were amazed. They said the chance of survival in his condition was almost non-existent. But Elaine's love and patience had sparked a miracle. A week later, Bruno managed to lift his head. Elaine looked into his face and couldn't hold back her tears. She had never believed in such things before. But now it was real. The clinic staff were deeply moved. They began calling Bruno and Elaine the soul reborn. Each small victory was a triumph for Elaine. Bruno began walking. A week later, he stepped outside on his own, weak, but with light in his eyes. Elaine took him to the park near her old home, the place where they had first met. See, we made it back. It all began right here. And now, nothing can stop us. Bruno looked at her and slowly wagged his tail. His way of saying, I know. Together, they sat quietly, watching the sun set. But this wasn't an ending. It was the dawn of new hope. Dawn was breaking, the sky tinted with pale light. Elaine opened her eyes and immediately turned to her side. Bruno wasn't moving. His breathing was faint, weak. Bruno, she cried, panic rising in her chest. The dog's eyes were half open, but he didn't stir. Elaine shouted for Jessica, her voice shaking with urgency. We need to get to the vet, now. Jessica sprang into action. Ryan helped carry Bruno to the car. Elaine held him tightly in her arms. You gave me everything back, Bruno. Now I'll do anything for you, she whispered. On the way to the clinic, Elaine's hands trembled. Tears welled in her eyes. As soon as they arrived, the doctors rushed Bruno in for examination. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, the vet emerged, his expression heavy with silence. We've found complications in Bruno's liver and heart, he said gently. It's age-related, a condition that's worsened over time. No, Elaine whispered. There has to be something we can do. We'll do everything possible. But you must prepare yourself for all outcomes. At that moment, it felt like Elaine's world collapsed once more. But this time, she didn't run from it. She walked into the room, knelt beside Bruno, and placed her hand on him. The dog opened his eyes just slightly and looked at her. It wasn't a farewell. It was trust. We're going to win this, Elaine whispered. You're strong. Just like you saved me, I'll save you. The following days were filled with waiting and fighting. Elaine came to the clinic every day. She played Bruno's favorite songs, told him stories and memories, sometimes just sat in silence, holding his paw. One day, the vets decided to move Bruno to a special care unit. One of them looked at Elaine and said, "If he makes it through this stage, it will be a miracle. But this is the hardest part." That night was the deciding night. Elaine stayed by Bruno's side in that quiet room, gently stroking his head. "You're not alone. You're my family, and I will never leave you." At that moment, a single tear rolled down from Bruno's eye. Elaine felt it land on her hand. Was it hope or a silent goodbye? That part was still unknown. It was the end of September. The trees were painted in shades of yellow and red, and the crisp air carried the scent of autumn. Elaine's birthday was approaching. Jessica, Ryan, and Oliver had been secretly planning a surprise for the past week. But lately, Bruno had changed. He wasn't as alert as before. In the mornings, he'd lie still, staring off into the distance. He didn't want to go on evening walks anymore. Elaine began to worry. "What's wrong, Bruno?" "You're not yourself," she said gently, stroking his head. "Are you tired? Or are you getting old?" Bruno simply closed his eyes and lay still, breathing softly. The birthday arrived. When Elaine walked into the house, everyone shouted, "Surprise!" The home was decorated with balloons, the cake was ready, and guests had gathered. Everyone shared kind wishes and warm smiles. But Elaine kept glancing around, always looking for Bruno. He was lying under the couch, his head resting on a cushion. His expression was somber. "Strange," Elaine whispered. "This has never happened before." Quietly excusing herself from the celebration, she stepped outside and sat down beside Bruno. "Is there something you want to tell me, Bruno? You've always sensed things before I did. Now I'm afraid of your silence," she said softly. Bruno laid his head on her knee. His body was trembling. Elaine broke down in tears. Deep inside, a quiet knowing. Though this evening was full of joy, a shadow was creeping closer. That night, Elaine held Bruno as they slept. She said nothing, just let her tears soak into the pillow. The next morning would be the morning that changed everything. It was one of those scorching summer days. Elaine and Oliver were walking through the garden. Jessica was at work, and Ryan was away on a business trip. Bruno lay in the shade, alert, his ears perked at every sound. Suddenly, a scream came from the neighbor's house. "Help! My child is inside." Elaine jumped to her feet. Their neighbor, Clara, was waving frantically, tears streaming down her face as she pounded on her front door. Smoke billowed from the windows, and the fire was spreading quickly. "Isaiah, my baby!" she cried out in desperation. Neighbors ran over, but no one knew what to do. Panic filled the air. Elaine looked at Bruno for a moment. "There's a child inside, Bruno. Can you help?" Bruno let out a long howl, then sprinted toward the house. Elaine managed to open the neighbor's door just in time. Bruno disappeared into the smoke. Everyone fell silent. Time felt frozen. 1 minute passed, then 2. Suddenly, through the thick smoke, Bruno emerged, dragging a small child behind him, gently nudging him forward with his snout. The child's clothes were covered in soot, but he was alive. Clara ran to them, scooping her son into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh my God! Thank you! If it weren't for this dog." People stared at Bruno in awe. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment. Within days, the story made local news. Headlines read, "Hero German Shepherd rescues child from house fire." For Elaine, this wasn't just an act of heroism. It was fate's gift. Everyone now saw the true worth of the loyal friend who had come into her life at her lowest point. Later, the city organized a special ceremony. Bruno was awarded the title of Honorary Rescuer of the City. Elaine spoke on stage, unable to hold back her tears. "This dog didn't just save a life, he saved my heart," she said. "I am no longer alone." From that day forward, Bruno became a local hero. Children drew pictures of him, schools invited him for visits. But for Bruno, none of that mattered as much as the quiet evenings beside Elaine. He knew his place. He was the heart of a family. On a chilly autumn evening, Elaine began to feel unwell. Her throat was dry, her body shivered, and she grew weaker with each passing hour. At first, she thought it was just a simple cold, but her condition kept worsening. One morning, she couldn't even get out of bed. Bruno didn't leave her side. He whimpered softly, walked to the door and back, growing increasingly restless. The dog knew Elaine was in trouble. That same moment, Jessica called her mother but got no answer. The phone rang several times before it finally went dead. Uneasy, she told her husband. Ryan immediately left work and rushed to Elaine's house. When he opened the door, Bruno was there to greet him, not barking but whining, leading him toward the bedroom. Elaine lay in bed, pale and struggling to breathe. "Oh my God," Ryan whispered, instantly calling an ambulance and alerting Jessica. Later, doctors diagnosed Elaine with pneumonia. She was hospitalized. Meanwhile, Bruno waited by the door day and night. From the moment Elaine was taken away, he refused to eat. No matter what Jessica or Oliver did, the dog sat staring at the door, waiting. "If something happens to Mom, I don't think he'll survive it," Jessica said in despair. "She has to pull through, not just for us, but for him too." 3 days passed. Elaine finally regained consciousness. The room was quiet. Her daughter and grandson sat beside her. But the first thing she asked was, "Where's Bruno?" "He's waiting for you, Mom. He's not eating. Won't take his eyes off the door. Please, let me see him," Elaine said with a faint smile. Once doctors approved the visit, something extraordinary happened. As soon as Bruno saw the hospital room door open, he rushed in. His joy was boundless. The dog laid his head gently on Elaine's bed, and it seemed as if there were tears in his eyes. "Thank you for existing, Bruno," Elaine whispered. "If not for you, I wouldn't have made it this far." The entire room stood in silence. Even the nurses and doctors were moved by the dog's love and loyalty. Later, Elaine was discharged from the hospital, but the experience had changed more than just her. It transformed the entire family. They now checked in on each other more often. Oliver played with Bruno every day, and Elaine made sure to always enjoy her morning tea with her faithful companion by her side. "You're not just my guardian," she often told him. "You protect this whole family." One morning, the doorbell suddenly rang. Elaine wasn't expecting anyone. Jessica and Ryan had gone to work, and Oliver was playing in the garden with Bruno. When Elaine opened the door, she couldn't believe her eyes. "Richard?" she said, her breath catching. Standing before her was her ex-husband. His shoulders drooped, his eyes were tired, and his beard had grown out. There was regret and a strange flicker of hope in his gaze. "Hello, Elaine," he said quietly. "You look well." Elaine stood frozen, unsure what to say. "What are you doing here?" she asked after a moment's pause. "I don't really know. Lately I've just felt exhausted. I spoke to the kids, found out they're staying with you. Maybe I came to ask for forgiveness." Elaine took a deep breath and stood silent for a moment. "When you left, everything collapsed. I had to learn how to stand again. So now what exactly do you want? Just forgiveness, maybe, to stay for a day or two. I'm lonely too, Elaine." At that moment, Bruno dashed out of the house. He passed Elaine and stopped, staring straight at the unfamiliar man. The dog sensed something, not danger, but uncertainty, a kind of unease. "Who is this?" Richard asked, stepping back slightly. "This is Bruno, my protector. I haven't been alone, Richard. With this dog, I learned to live again." Richard nodded, eyes cast downward. "I just wanted to see if you're okay." "I'm much better now, but it's all thanks to Bruno. He brought me back. I'd like to meet the kids again. We've missed so much, Elaine." "All right, but you don't walk into this house on your own terms anymore. Your place is on the edge now. If you truly want forgiveness, show it through your actions." Richard nodded. That day, he apologized to both Elaine and Jessica. By evening, the whole family sat outside, sipping tea together. But Elaine never took her eyes off Bruno. In his gaze, she read, "I'm still here, but this wasn't the end." Another test still awaited them. 2 weeks later, Elaine's house felt truly alive again for the first time. When her daughter Jessica, son-in-law Ryan, and their 6-year-old son Oliver walked through the door, Elaine's heart nearly stopped. "Mom," Jessica said quietly, tears welling in her eyes. Elaine said nothing. She simply opened her arms. Her daughter rushed into her embrace, crying. Ryan and Oliver stood silently behind. After a moment, Elaine bent down and looked at Oliver. "Are you my grandson?" she asked with a gentle smile. Oliver, a bit shy, replied, "Are you my grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart. I've been waiting a long time to meet you," Elaine said, unable to hold back her tears. At that moment, Bruno came running from the back room and began barking at the unfamiliar faces. But Elaine said softly, "Stop, Bruno. These are my family." Little Oliver stepped back in fear, but Bruno paused, then slowly approached him. The warmth in the dog's eyes and the gentle touch of his nose to the boy's hand made Oliver smile. "Did you keep this dog just for me, Grandma?" Elaine chuckled. "No, he's my companion now." They settled into the house. But not everything became perfect overnight. During dinner, Jessica spoke up. "Mom, we regret so much, but you haven't always been easy either." Elaine listened silently. Her heart stung at first, but unlike before, she didn't snap. Bruno, lying on the floor, lifted his head and looked at her. Elaine took a deep breath and replied calmly, "Yes, I've been harsh, but when you left, everything fell apart. I lost Max, and I lost myself, but I don't hold it against you. I've started living again, and this time Bruno is the one walking beside me. Mom, we want to be a family again, but this time let's take it slow. You get used to us and we'll get used to you." Elaine nodded. That night, for the first time, she fell asleep with her heart at peace. After such a long time, the laughter, the child's chatter, the smells from the kitchen, they all spoke of life moving forward. As for Bruno, he played with Oliver in the evening, whimpering excitedly, dashing from room to room, filling the house with joy and energy. But Elaine knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. Elaine is 62 years old. Once surrounded by a big family, she now sits alone in her home. The only one by her side is Max, a German shepherd. He is a memory of her late husband, a loyal friend, the last living soul in her life. It's been 2 years since her husband passed away. Her son lives in another city, and her daughter lives in America. It's been over a year since they last visited. Whenever they talk on the phone, they're always in a hurry, never truly listening, not even for a moment. Sometimes, Elaine wakes up in the morning, looks around her empty home, and thinks, "Is this the end of my life?" Only Max is with her. Every morning, he takes her for a walk, and in the evening, he lays his head on her feet and lies quietly. Elaine lives for those moments. She waits for him and only him. One day, the weather turned harsh. The wind howled, snow fell endlessly. When Elaine woke up that morning, she felt weak. Her head was spinning. A sharp pain struck her chest. Suddenly, she collapsed to the floor. Max started barking loudly, nudging his owner, trying to wake her. Elaine managed to regain consciousness just enough to crawl to her phone and call for an ambulance. The medics arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Max watched the ambulance leave and howled into the cold morning. Elaine stayed in the hospital for a week. She called her children several times to let them know, but they were busy with work with their kids or just had other excuses. None of them came. Finally, one morning, the doctor came in and said, "Your condition is stable now. You can go home." Elaine returned home alone. When she opened the door, Max greeted her joyfully. He had missed her deeply, but there was no smile on Elaine's face, only a heavy sadness. "No one needs me anymore, Max. Only you're left," she whispered. From that day forward, Elaine became even closer to Max. They walked together, sat together, breathed together. Max became her shadow, never leaving her side. But as time passed, Max also began to grow ill. He was getting old, his joints ached, and he stopped eating. Elaine grew worried and took him to the vet. The vet shook his head. "It's natural aging. I'm afraid he doesn't have much time left." Back home, Elaine held Max's head in her lap and whispered, "Please don't leave me alone, Max." But a week later, in the middle of the night, Max quietly passed away. He lay beside his owner, slipping into an eternal sleep. In the morning, Elaine awoke to find him still. She broke down, crying uncontrollably. The house fell silent once more, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Deep, empty, cold. Days went by without her speaking to anyone. She barely ate. Eventually, she created a small flower bed in Max's memory and placed his collar with its engraved tag as a keepsake. From that moment, everything changed.